right, I'm Crawford. This is firefighter Johnson. We're on the hazmat team. We did a bunch of research with all the biolab fire. We were going to teach a class today. We ended up not being able to, but you get to benefit from our results. We pulled up this morning. It did smell like chlorine in the parking lot. So we popped out our Drager CMS chip monitor, put in the chlorine chip, and Johnson walked around and scanned it. And go ahead and tell them your findings and kind of where that place is and what that means.
All right, so when I was walking around scanning with it, I wound up getting a reading of less than 0.2 parts per million.
That's like 1/5 of 1 part per million.
Yep. So with that, that's gonna fall into this range here. I made a nice graph because it makes it easier to organize my thoughts. So that puts you in this zone right here, and that's just the range where you're gonna smell it, and it's not really gonna hurt you a lot. So you don't typically start to see any adverse effects until you get up above 1 part per million, and even then, it's a very light effect. It's because that's about the concentration of chlorine that you'll see in a residential pool. So if you've ever inhaled that pool water and that stinging that you get up in your sinuses, that's about the extent of what you're going to feel from it. And that's just going to irritate your eyes, nose, throat, and most people, they estimate, can tolerate for about an hour. So after that's when you start getting into the actual IDLH range.
So if it was 5 times worse than it is right now, for 1 hour you could walk away with no adverse health effects, and right now for an hour it just bothers you. Mm-hmm. But we're way below that level.
Absolutely. So a couple things to touch on first. So OSHA's got their clever little system of recommended exposure levels for chlorine gas. That's going to be 0.5 parts per million in over 15 minutes. So what that's saying is that if you're in an enclosed area with no ventilation, you could walk around in 0.5 parts per million for 15 minutes without any protection, and you'll be okay.
And that helps for like certain jobs that work around chlorine. Sometimes you are going to be exposed to it, and they make these OSHA guidelines to how much you can without it actually being a danger to your health throughout your work week.
Yeah, and like I said, that's still air. There's no ventilation. You're in an enclosed area with all that chlorine. So open air like we got right now that's not even a big concern. So then you get into your 5 to 15 parts per million, you'll start seeing that mucous membrane irritation. That's gonna start really burning the back of your throat, your ears, and eyes. In order to reach those concentrations, it's got to be a very bad disaster, like one that I don't think that we've ever really seen anything like that in Georgia. So then you get into the next category above that, 30 to 60 parts per million. This is where you start getting into the range that's you're not generally going to be able to see in a civilian impact, because you're starting to get up into the range of like World War II chlorine gas, where it's actively being used to hurt people. So you're not going to see a lot of that just from accidents. But yeah, you'll start getting chest pain, shortness of breath, and coughing, a little toxic pneumonitis, which is just inflammation of the lungs. But even that stuff, it's still not going to immediately, it's not necessarily going to be a permanent adverse effects to you, because you can still recover from that. When you start getting up into 400 plus parts per million, that's when you'll start worrying about actual lethality. And like I said, in order to achieve that kind of concentration, it's got to be it has to be an enclosed space with no ventilation.
Yeah, and times when that's happened, it's like when a train derails, everyone's been asleep, and the yellow cloud has been around your house while you've been sleeping for 6 hours, and it's getting into your ventilation system. But typically that's not going to happen.
No, that is not the situation that we're looking at. A couple other numbers up here. That's the big scary ones that we really ain't got to worry too much about in our state. But another aspect of chlorine that does need to be considered as far as a hazmat perspective goes is the formation of hydrochloric acid. So that's actually stomach acid. That's what's in your stomach and digests food. Got your pH is typically measured as being less than 1, and so, but it's kind of difficult to make that into an aerosol. So it's not something we typically worry too much about.
I know from some of the incidents I've seen it on shows and documentaries, it's like once it starts getting in the air and it's mixed with the water, it starts making all the metal on the appliances or engines just start drip. And then people that have been like exposed to it and they are inhaling it, and it's mixed with moisture in their bodies and everything, they'll be throwing up, and people will be like, why is ground beef coming out of my mouth? And it's their lung tissue is deteriorating because it's so moist inside.
Yeah. So that is a concern. I said though, so they did, in the research they did for when it comes to hydrochloric acid as a gas, if you're inhaling it, so that there's a measurement called lethal dose 50%, which is the concentration that would take to kill 50% of a assessed population. And so for hydrochloric acid as an aerosol, that's about 3,000 parts per million. So
and again, we're less than 1.
Yeah, and so then another concern with the hydrochloric acid is that because it's so acidic, it binds really easy to metals, and it will release that pure hydrogen gas, which can in an open air space is not as big of a concern as a closed-in area, because in those closed-in areas, that buildup of hydrogen gas can create the potential for large fires and explosions. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for all the research you did in this chart. That's really great. Just to recap a little bit from the biolab fire, this is the 704, NFPA 704. This helps firefighters know immediately what they're dealing with. So on the health scale, when you're talking about your bio body being in danger, it's as bad as it gets. It's going to be affected. Very bad to inhale, very bad to get on your skin. And then for flammability, not too bad. 0, stability, 0 is not very reactive. And then here's at the bottom, it'll tell you if it's radioactive or whatever mystery component it has. It's an oxidizer. So oxidizers, they generate oxygen. So if something's like on fire, it's going to be very hard to put it out if an oxidizer is involved. So it's just going to continually generate oxygen. It's going to make it mega hard to smother the fire. And then it can pressurize a container if it's heated. So you will get a container explode if the container is heated, and it can aid in explosions. It might not explode on its own, but if there is an explosion from another factor, it can definitely help. Inhalation hazard, burned skin, eye damage, really bad danger to the environment like fish if it gets in waterways. And then like you said, mixed with water, you're gonna have hydrochloric acid. That's why we would not do a wet decon. They've made just mistakes in the past where they tell people to get in the shower to wash it off over the 911 dispatch. Just take the clothes off, and we're gonna just use dry cloths and stuff like that. All right, so the biolab, this happened yesterday at 5 a.m. over in Rockdale County, Conyers. So they had a sprinkler go off because they had a roof fire, and the water reacted with some of the chemicals they had. They mainly work on chlorine there at biolab, and they ship their products out in a safer, usable way to like pool stores. So 17,000 people were evacuated. The county has almost 100,000 people in it. They're all told to shelter in place, turn your AC off, stay in your place. Soot and burning inhalation vapors were felt and saw up to 8 miles away. For over 20 years, that place has been in business. They've had incidents every 3 to 5 years, fires, other similar incidents. This is the worst, of course. And that's going to be about it, but they are still out there fighting it. We came into work today, and like I said, we could smell chlorine at our fire station, and that's been a big complaint from the citizens today, so that's why we went out and monitored the air. Thanks for checking it out.